All right, where are we going to go here? Looks like I'm about live. I'm going to share this, or am I? Let me see. How do I do that? Present slides. All right, where are they? Oh my. All right, it's going to let me do it this way, I think. Sorry for the delay here. I've got to figure out how to upload everything. StreamYard is new, although this is going to be in a lot of different groups. So let's see. Someone just said, I'm still in the group you left. Do I need a new link? Maybe. Let's change the way that one appears. How about this? That'll work. All right. Well, you know what? I'm trying something new. I'm using StreamYard, even though I'm not brand new to StreamYard. I hadn't done it this way yet. But we are having a month of the $1 Million Mindset. And absolutely, one of my great mentors, Eric Worre. If you don't know about Eric, one of the best stories out there, a real true rags to riches story. And by the way, here's a guy that really struggled his first 23 years in life, found a business model that actually resonated with a skill set that he could develop. And what he'll tell you after earning many tens of millions, maybe even approaching 100 million with a better model, he said, you know what, the skill sets I believe are the highest paid for how relatively easy they are to learn. But with that said, when we start talking about how the $1 Million Mindset works, it really is between your ears. I remember listening to Bob Proctor, who was certainly one of the best mindset coaches ever. He was really the main guy featured in the movie The Secret. And I watched him at a conference. He said, look, if there's a problem in your life or in your business, the problem is really between your ears. It's your head space. It's your mind space. And if you fix that, you're going to be okay. So keep in mind, your network is your net worth. And that's what Eric Worre has been so successfully teaching people for such a long time. But here's what he says. Nearly every networker knows what they should do and what they could do. But there's a massive gap, a huge gap between what they know and should do and what they actually do. So we want to try to close that gap. And in fact, it's actually been called the integrity gap. So I like this quote from Bill Phillips. There's a world of difference between knowing what to do and actually doing it. And how about this? The difference between who you are and who you want to be is what you do. And think about that. Actions absolutely speak louder than words. It's definitely been said that, it's a lot nicer to tell someone well done rather than well said, because, hey, most of the time it's pretty easy to say things rather than do them. So this was a book that I enjoyed years ago. And what a fascinating title. If how-tos were enough, we would all be skinny, rich, and happy. Now, think about that. Do people generally know how to lose weight? I'm going to say, yeah, they do. They make better food choices, less overall quality, better movement, manage stress, get good sleep. But if you get the big two, eat less, move more, eat higher quality foods, you're probably going to be there if you give it enough time. But the reality is we take a step forward and often a step back, or 2 steps back, or 3 steps back, or 5 steps back, or however many we take. So Joe Dispenza, loved this absolute genius. He's really on the cutting edge of figuring out what makes people actually work. And notice what he says. He says 95% of who you are by the time you're 35 years old is a set of memorized behaviors, skills, emotional reactions, beliefs, perceptions, and attitudes that function like a subconscious automatic computer program. Now, I tried to validate that 95% number. And even though it gets bounced around a lot, I don't know if that's entirely accurate, but way too much. A lot of what we do is basically things that we're conditioned to do. We just do them automatically. And I still recall Bob Proctor. Sometimes he would do something wrong, like when he was in the Army. And someone would say, well, Bob, why'd you do that? And he'd say, I don't know. They said, well, you know better. He says, yeah, I know. And then he said, well, why'd you do it? He says, I don't know. Well, he figured out that he had to get his mind space right. And by the way, when he did, he built a phenomenal global organization and added value to tens of millions around the world. Carl Jung, a very powerful quote. He says, until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate. So Bruce Lipton came up with a way of changing that subconscious program, or changing what Bob Proctor called the paradigm. So 4 different pictures here. The top left is actually disgust, even though it might not look like disgust. Jim Rohn, who, by the way, was a broke college dropout the day that 2 Girl Scouts knocked on his door selling cookies. They looked at him and they said, hey, we've got these great cookies. We're raising money for a good cause. Would you like to buy a few boxes? And he says, you know what? They were sweet and cute and had a good pitch and good product. He says, but reality was I was far too embarrassed to tell them that I didn't have $2 to buy their cookies. Now think about that. 25-year-old guy, family on the way, plenty of time, a quarter of a century to get his life in order. And he hadn't done it by then. And so he looked at the girls. He says, yeah, sorry, girls, I already bought some from my niece. Well, I'm not even sure that he had a niece at the time, but when he closed that door and walked away, he said, never again. How low can I sink? I just lied to 2 Girl Scouts. Enough is enough. And he got a mentor and he learned some skills. And you know what? He, at his death, go look up his net worth. He was worth over $500 million, $500 million. And he did the majority of that in network marketing, and then parlayed the skills that he used. Rather than going around in the circle, I'm going to go next to Michael Phelps. You know what? If you literally make a commitment to just go all out every single day, that's one good way to get ahead. And, maybe the modern example of that, Michael Phelps is retired, right? But David Goggins, probably the toughest guy on the planet, maybe one of the toughest in the history of the planet. But same thing, he was fed up with his life. He didn't want to be fat. He didn't want to be lazy. He didn't want to be unsuccessful. And he knew he was willing to work hard. He didn't know how to work hard, but he was willing to do it. And he says academics weren't his thing. Now, keep in mind, we're all geniuses, just in a different way. He's a genius at understanding his body, understanding motivation, and knowing how to get the best out of himself and others. Love, that's probably all of our favorites. Think about that. If you suddenly fall in love, and it certainly can be with another person, that's a great way to do. Or how about falling in love with an idea, or falling in love with a process? Love is the secret sauce. That can actually change everything. And if you truly love something and you do anything for it, well, guess what? You just do it, and you do it consistently. And those are the 3 pathways that Bruce Lipton said, hey, listen, if you want to take a new direction, that's what you do. You either get so disgusted that you got to change, you work super duper hard, or you fall in love. And how about this? Maybe all 3. Maybe that would be the fastest way ever to get there. So I love the book, The One Thing. And this was from the movie City Slickers. And Gary Keller, he talks about this story where Jack Palance is telling Billy Crystal, look, life is just about one thing, and if you get that one thing, you're gonna have your best life. And Billy Crystal says, well, what's the one thing? He says, that's up to you to figure out. Now, here's what I like to tell people. There is a universal purpose for all of us. And I believe it's accurate. I believe that we're all supposed to show up as our best self in some service to something bigger than ourselves. And I would tweak that a little bit. I first learned that phraseology from Brian Johnson, but how about this? We show up as our best and getting better self in service to something bigger than ourselves. Scott Adams, powerful quote here. If you want success, figure out the price, then pay it. Now, do we really know the price up front? Maybe not, but we do know that the price does need to be paid in advance. You don't get the success and then pay. No. You pay the price, or rather, I would rather use the term, you make the investment, and then ultimately success is yours. So Albert Gray wrote a very small yet powerful book called The Common Denominator of Success. And you know what? Here's what he said. He says, successful people make a habit of doing the things that unsuccessful people don't like to do, don't want to do, and essentially don't do. Now, it's often been said the successful people don't like doing it either. They just know it needs to be done. Or you could be someone like Goggins, who literally falls in love with the pain. And great quote from Jim Rohn. He said, we all must suffer one of two pains, the pain of discipline and or the pain of regret and disappointment. And how about Muhammad Ali? What a wonderful human and what a great example in so many different ways. But he said this, and I don't know if it's accurate, but it's a great quote. He says, I hated every minute of training. He might have pushed himself that hard that every minute was painful and he hated it. But he said he loved every moment as being a champion. And how about every moment as being recognized as the absolute best athlete of the entire last century? So, Tony Robbins, I first phrased this as the S cube, super cube strategy with 3 S's. His is state, story, strategy in that order. You want to be in a really good physiologic state, healthy, happy, strong, fit, well rested with good posture. Story, I can do and will do whatever it takes to make this wonderful world better. And then strategy, well, that's the least important. But you know what? Get moving. And then I always like this plan, do, review, improve, repeat the process. And a little better every day can make a monumental difference. But this S cubed is going to be share, sample, sell. So if you want to build a nice business, everybody likes to share. Very few people like to sell. And one thing that I remember this quote, it says, look, everybody likes to buy, but no one wants to be sold, right? You want to understand the benefits and make a decision without being coerced or manipulated in any direction. But sharing is fairly easy to do. You know what? And if you can ultimately share whatever it is that you're offering, and, in my case, my favorite business outside of my office and my most profitable business is Reishi infused coffee and tea. So can I share a sample? Absolutely. Or share it. And that is just sitting down with a friend and let me buy you a cup of coffee. Easy enough. Sample. Well, that's more of someone you don't have as good a relationship with and say, look, I'd like you to try this. And if you like it, I'd like to earn your business, and then sell. And then ultimately, here's what we know. You can sell your way to the top, right? That is one skill that should always be able to give you and your family, your loved ones, the best life you could ever want. So start with this. Would you like to share a cup of coffee with me? Now, I promise you, it doesn't matter what business you're in. If you're in a different business, this is one of the most solid ways to start a conversation with an individual. I was at a networking seminar. Eric Worre was teaching it, and he said, all right, I'm actually going to suggest that within 10 minutes, I can get you a bunch of appointments with these actions. And he said, send people a text, coffee, ? And you know what? The average person in that room had half a dozen people, within the hour that said, yeah, absolutely, I'm up for that. I made mine a little stronger. I said, coffee, ? I'm buying, ! Or smiley face or whatever I put in it. And people said, absolutely. When, where, and let's get together for coffee. And samples are a solid strategy because it removes the risk. People get to try before they buy. And again, when it comes to the coffee, I will give a money back guarantee, and I have for 11 years. By the way, no one's ever asked me for money back yet. Isn't that fascinating? So the product is literally that good. Now, I remember this phrase, and I've studied sales, how to sell ice to Eskimos, or they would say, that used to be a really complimentary description of a good salesperson. But reality is that doesn't work anymore, because if you're selling someone something that they don't need, you're not going to have a long-term relationship. You want to have the type of relationship with people that will work and create, lasting rapport and value back and forth. And Bob Burg, he wrote the book, The Go-Giver. And by the way, that's a classic. If you hadn't read it yet, I recommend that you do. But here's what he said. The great salesmanship is never about the salesperson. It's literally always about the person you're connected with and how you can add value to their life and to their world. And by the way, I pulled this picture off the internet, and think about that, right? It shows a great salesman and that quote as he's sharing a cup of coffee. So there's something wonderful and universal about that. Robert Louis Stevenson wrote Treasure Island. He said, look, everybody lives by selling something. So let's talk about selling products. Housing, real estate has made a lot of millionaires, but think about the housing market right now. How's it going? If you're paying attention to it, some $10 trillion company called BlackRock in a lot of neighborhoods, including neighborhoods around me, paid above average dollar for homes that were for sale. Why? Because they're basically squeezing individual family members out of the housing market. That's the mindset behind it. You'll own nothing and you'll be happy. That doesn't sound like a good strategy to me. This is John Paul DeJoria, and he's one of the co-founders of Paul Mitchell Hair Products. And he says, you know what, I've made $1 billion. I'm a pretty good salesman, but you absolutely don't want to be in the sales business. However, you absolutely do want to be in the reorder business. And again, coffee may be the best reorder product anywhere in the world. Ours is delicious, more convenient, more cost-effective, and outrageously healthy. And that gives us so many different advantages. And then Ed Mylett on this podcast talked about selling the dream. And my favorite quote about coffee is that no dream is too big for coffee. And Ed Mylett talked about selling the dream was his superpower. And he often referenced Steve Jobs and Martin Luther King. They sold their dream. And by the way, there's a quote if the dream is big enough, it will outlast the dreamer. So certainly Apple has outlasted Steve Jobs and has thrived. And the civil rights movement has certainly outlasted Martin Luther King. And you know what? I'm of the mindset that we're a lot better than we were back then, even though we still have some ground to gain. Wouldn't it be beautiful if we just all loved one another based on our character? We don't want to get political here, but there's good people and bad people. And you know what? We want to love the bad people because they probably need a lot more love, but we probably want to spend less time with them and more time with the good, and find ways to add value as many ways as we possibly can. And then Paul Caldwell, the chairman of Organo, he says this, we're going to build a multi-billion-dollar multinational ecosystem where literally everyone wins. So here's the progression. You can share. That's kind of the crawling phase. You can sample. Now you're walking a little bit. You sell. Now you got some speed going. And then when you lead, that's where your life really takes off. So, this is a new platform. I often have people on this Monday training, but not at this moment. They're not here at this moment in time because I didn't know how to bring them into the studio. If you're watching on Facebook, you can put a question in the chat. If you are on any of our messenger chats, you could leave me a message there, but I don't see that that's there. So, you know what? We do this every Monday. August is Millionaire Mindset Month. And I'll tell you what, you get things right between your ears, then the rest of your life will likely fall in place. And as always, I'm Dr. Bob Rakowski, absolutely knowing that we can all be happy, healthy, and successful. So, good night, all, and God bless.